The first time I saw them, I thought nothing of it. Just another entitled mother and her awkward son. The kind you encounter once and forget. But Karen and Todd weren't forgettable. They weren't normal. I had always looked out for my sister, Emily. She was younger by 3 years, a little too kind for her own good, always willing to believe the best in people. It was her first job at the small coffee shop on the corner, the one where the morning rush came with the smell of burnt espresso and the clatter of ceramic mugs. She liked it. Said the customers were mostly decent. Then they showed up. Karen came in first, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of conversation like a buzzsaw. She wasn't tall, but she had a presence, sharp, demanding, as if the world existed to serve her. Her blonde bob was stiff with hairspray, and her eyes darted around the cafe like a supervisor searching for something to criticize. Todd slouched behind her, taller than her, but somehow smaller, his narrow shoulders hunched, hands stuffed in the pockets of his hoodie. I noticed him looking at Emily before she did. He wasn't just looking. He was staring, the kind that makes your skin crawl like something is crawling underneath it. Emily greeted them with her usual bright smile. "Hi. What can I get for you today?" Karen didn't acknowledge her. She was too busy complaining about the menu. Too expensive, too fancy. Why don't they serve real coffee instead of this hipster nonsense? But Todd was still staring, his mouth slightly open, blinking too little, too slow. I'll have a caramel macchiato," he muttered, voice low and hoarse. Emily nodded and rang them up. I could see her discomfort in the slight twitch of her fingers, the way she turned away quickly after handing Karen her change. The first red flag. They started coming in every day. Karen was always loud, always rude, complaining about the service, the seating, the music, the customers. And Todd always found a reason to linger. At first, it was just small talk. "You make the best coffee here," he told Emily one day, leaning over the counter. "I always make sure you're working before I come in." Emily smiled politely, the kind of smile you give when you're trapped in a conversation you don't want to be in. "Oh, thanks. We all use the same machine, though." Todd laughed, a weird, choked sound, like he didn't actually know how to laugh properly. No. It's different when you do it." The next red flag. He started waiting by the pickup counter, even when his drink was ready. Watching her. Finding excuses to talk to her. He'd spill a little of his drink, just to come back and ask her for napkins. Stand too close, just inside her personal space. He never touched her, not at first, but his presence had weight. One evening, as Emily and I walked home together, she sighed. "That guy's weird." "Todd?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Yeah, I don't know. He just gives me the creeps." I frowned. "Has he done anything?" She shook her head. "No. Just the way he looks at me." She laughed, but it was forced. "It's probably nothing. I'm overreacting." She wasn't. The next time Karen and Todd came in, I was there. I sat in the corner pretending to be on my phone, but I was watching. Karen had her usual complaints, but this time something was different. She was watching Todd watch Emily, and instead of pulling him away, she smiled. "She's a pretty girl, isn't she?" Karen said suddenly, voice sweet in a way that made my stomach turn. Emily froze mid-motion, gripping the milk frother tighter. Thank you. Karen nudged Todd. You should say something, honey. Girls like confidence. Todd grinned, wide, awkward, too eager. Yeah, you're really pretty. Emily laughed uneasy, glancing toward her manager, who was conveniently ignoring the situation. That's nice of you to say. Karen sighed dramatically. Oh, don't be so modest, dear. My son is very observant. He doesn't just compliment anyone. Emily looked at me then, just a flick of her eyes, quick and uncertain. I set down my phone. Karen wasn't done. She turned to Todd. You know, women like when men are persistent. Show them you really care. Todd nodded, his gaze locked onto Emily like she was something he could own. The biggest red flag yet. The next few days were worse. Todd would linger longer. He started asking questions. When do you get off work? Do you have a boyfriend? Where do you usually go after your shift? Emily dodged, answered vaguely. But Todd kept pushing, and Karen encouraged him. She's just playing hard to get, she'd say, right in front of Emily, as if she wasn't even a person. Women like the chase. Don't give up, sweetheart. Emily stopped smiling, stopped engaging at all, keeping everything short, professional. Then one night I walked her home, and she stopped short in front of our apartment building. My stomach dropped. Across the street, standing half hidden in the shadows of a lamppost, was Todd. Just standing, watching. My hands curled into fists. Did he follow you? Emily's voice was small. I don't know. I took a step forward, ready to march over there. But Todd turned, walking away quickly, disappearing into the night. Emily swallowed hard. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I didn't believe that. Neither did she. And somehow, I knew this wasn't over. Emily stopped walking home alone after that night. I made sure of it. Every shift, I was either waiting outside or walking her back, scanning the streets for any sign of Todd. It didn't matter how much she tried to downplay it, how many times she said, maybe he just happened to be there. I knew better. And I knew it wasn't over. At work, things got worse. Todd had always been a presence, but now he was always there morning, afternoon, evening. It didn't matter. Sometimes he wouldn't even order anything, just loiter by the counter or sit at a corner table, eyes locked on Emily while she worked. His drink would sit untouched, growing cold, as if he'd forgotten why he was even there. Emily stopped looking in his direction. She moved fast, avoided standing still too long, and made sure she wasn't the one to take his order. If she saw him in line, she'd busy herself with the espresso machine or disappear into the back, anything to keep from interacting with him. Karen, of course, noticed. Emily, sweetie, she crooned one day, leaning over the counter with an exaggerated pout. Are you ignoring my son? Emily forced a polite smile. I've just been really busy. Karen scoffed. Nonsense. You were all smiles when he first started coming in. What changed? Todd was right beside her, watching, waiting for an answer. Emily hesitated. I could see her weighing the risk of saying the wrong thing, of setting either of them off. She chose her words carefully. Nothing changed. She gestured to the long line behind them. I really need to get through these orders. Karen didn't move. Neither did Todd. Well, I hope you're not leading him on, Karen said, her voice just loud enough for the other customers to hear. It's very rude to play with a man's feelings like that. Emily's fingers tensed around the cup she was holding. I'm not. I raised my son to be persistent, Karen interrupted, smiling too wide. Women like persistence. And Todd likes you. Todd's grin was too eager, too expectant. Yeah, I really do. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it, glancing toward her manager. He was looking right at her. Then he turned away. Later, when I picked her up, she looked exhausted. She rubbed at her temples, sighing as we walked. He just won't stop. I clenched my jaw. You need to tell your boss to ban him. She let out a short, humorless laugh. He won't. Todd hasn't done anything. Not really. And Karen spends a lot of money here. I think he's afraid of losing her as a customer. I gritted my teeth. That night, Emily got a message request on Instagram. Hey. No profile picture, no name she recognized, but the account was new, barely a day old. She ignored it. The next morning, another message. You looked really pretty today. Emily blocked the account. The next evening, a different account. Why won't you talk to me? I sat beside her on the couch, staring at the screen. It's him? Emily swallowed hard. I can't prove that. Who else would it be? She had no answer. By the end of the week, it wasn't just messages. Someone had liked an old photo of hers, 3 years old, deep in her profile. Someone had viewed her stories within seconds of her posting them. Someone had made an account with her name in it. An exact copy of hers, down to the profile picture. I saw the way her hands trembled as she blocked each new account. The next night, I picked her up from work as usual. The walk home was quiet, tense. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but the streets were empty. No sign of Todd. We reached our apartment building, and just as Emily pulled out her keys, her phone vibrated in her hand. A notification flashed across the screen. My stomach turned. It was a picture of us, taken just moments ago, from somewhere behind us. Emily's breath hitched. She whipped around, searching the dark street. Nothing. No one. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her inside, locking the door behind us. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The next morning we went to the police. They listened. They nodded sympathetically. They even took down a report. But when it came down to action, they had nothing to offer. We don't have concrete proof it's him, the officer said, flipping through his notes. And even if we did, he hasn't technically threatened you. He's following her, I snapped. He's harassing her online. The officer exhaled, looking tired. He hasn't directly made contact outside of the cafe, has he? Emily hesitated. No, but... We can't do much unless there's a clear threat or a crime committed, he said, snapping the folder shut. For now, just be careful. If anything escalates, call us immediately. We walked out feeling worse than before. At work, Karen was still Karen, loud, condescending, acting as if she and Emily were friends, but there was something else now. Something smug in the way she watched her. One day, after I dropped Emily off for her shift, I lingered outside, watching through the window. Todd was already there, sitting at a table waiting. Emily ignored him keeping busy. Then Karen leaned in across the counter and murmured something. Emily went still. Karen smiled, patted Todd's arm, then turned and walked out. I went inside. Emily barely looked up as I approached the counter. But I saw it, her hands gripping the register a little too tightly, her lips pressed together, her shoulders stiff. "What did she say?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Emily exhaled shakily. She said, "You can't avoid him forever." I looked over at Todd. He was still staring. Emily was right. This wasn't stopping. Emily wasn't sleeping. I could hear it in the way she moved through the apartment, light footsteps pacing in the kitchen at odd hours, the creak of the couch as she sat up instead of lying in bed. She tried to act normal, but she wasn't eating much, wasn't laughing like she used to. The messages had stopped, not because Todd had given up, but because he didn't need to send them anymore. He had made his point. She wasn't safe. I started driving her to and from work. Walking wasn't an option anymore. She barely argued when I insisted, and that told me everything I needed to know. She was just as scared as I was. But even that wasn't enough. One night, I pulled into the parking lot a few minutes before her shift ended. The cafe's lights spilled onto the pavement, turning the lot into an island of yellow against the dark street. I kept my hands on the wheel, scanning the area. And then I saw him. Todd was standing just outside the glow of the street lamp, his hoodie pulled up, face shadowed. He wasn't near the entrance, wasn't waiting in line. He was just watching. My fingers curled into a fist against my thigh. My first instinct was to get out to confront him, but I forced myself to wait. I wanted to see what he was going to do. The minutes dragged. Then Emily stepped out of the cafe. She didn't see him at first. She was too busy tugging on her jacket, rubbing her arms against the cold. Then, as she started toward the car, she glanced up and stopped. Even from the driver's seat, I saw the way her breath hitched, the way her fingers tightened on her bag strap. Todd stepped forward. That was it. That was the moment I snapped. I threw the car into park and got out. My footsteps were fast, loud against the pavement. Asterisk, eh? Asterisk. Todd jerked at the sound of my voice, his head snapping toward me. For a split second, something flickered across his face, shock, maybe even fear. Then Karen stepped out of the shadows. I hadn't seen her before. She must have been waiting nearby hidden. But now she walked toward Todd, her expression calm, amused. "Oh, settle down," she said, waving a hand like I was some unruly child throwing a tantrum. No need to make a scene. I ignored her. My focus was on Todd. "What the hell are you doing here?" My voice was low, barely controlled. Todd looked at Karen like he was waiting for her to answer for him. Karen sighed. "You're overreacting." Todd just wanted to walk Emily to her car. That's chivalry, you know. Boys don't do that enough these days. Emily was shaking. Not crying. She never cried in front of people. But her whole body was tight, like she was bracing for something. I took a step toward Todd. "She doesn't want that." Karen scoffed. "Oh, please." You women send such mixed messages. You smile, you're nice, and then you act surprised when a man takes an interest. Emily let out a shaky breath. I was just being polite. Karen gave her a patronizing look. Exactly. And you led him on. That was it. That was the moment I stopped holding back. I swear to God, if he doesn't leave her alone. What? Karen tilted her head, all fake sweetness. Are you going to hit my son? You think that'll make you the hero? I didn't answer. My hands were already clenched into fists. She smirked. Go ahead then. Hit him. We'll call the cops. Tell them how you attacked my poor boy for no reason. That made me pause, because she would twist everything, turn Todd into the victim. She had been laying the groundwork for it this whole time, making Emily seem like the one who had encouraged him, planting the idea that he was just a boy with feelings, that we were the ones being unreasonable. I exhaled sharply and turned to Emily. Get in the car? She hesitated, still frozen between fear and rage. But I didn't give her time to process. I reached for her arm, not forcefully, just enough to ground her, to snap her out of whatever spiral she was trapped in. She let me lead her away. Todd took a half step forward, like he wanted to say something. Karen put a hand on his chest, stopping him. Let them go, sweetheart, she said, loud enough for us to hear. She'll come around. Emily tensed beside me. We got in the car, and I locked the doors before even starting the engine. My hands were shaking. Emily was staring straight ahead, her face pale. She's never going to stop, she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. We both knew it was true. That night, Emily slept on the couch, refusing to be alone in her room. I sat up with her, neither of us talking, just watching the locked door as if expecting it to burst open at any second. It wasn't until just before dawn that I finally saw her shoulders relax, her breathing slow. I thought she had fallen asleep. Then she whispered, I think I need to quit my job. I hated how relieved I felt, because as much as I wanted to fight, as much as I wanted to make sure Karen and Todd never came near her again, I just wanted my sister to be safe. I knew Emily wasn't going to quit her job. Not yet anyway. She was too proud, too stubborn to let Karen and Todd win. But the tension between her desire to escape and her fear of giving in had reached a boiling point. Every day, I watched her shoulders tense as she approached the cafe, her eyes scanning the area like she expected one of them to jump out from behind a corner. I wasn't the only one noticing the change. Her manager had started asking her if she was feeling okay, if she needed extra shifts, if she wanted some time off. But Emily just shook her head, pretending everything was fine. I couldn't blame her. I knew she wasn't ready to face the truth, that Karen's hold on her life, on everything, was suffocating. I should have confronted Karen directly. I should have called her out, gone straight to her face, and said what I'd been holding back for weeks. Stop making my sister your project, but I hadn't. And now I was paying for it. That afternoon, I dropped Emily off at the cafe as usual, the air between us thick with unsaid words. As she stepped out of the car, I caught a glimpse of Todd sitting by the window, watching, just staring at her. I could feel my teeth grind together, my hands tighten on the steering wheel. But Emily didn't see him. She didn't see the way he was waiting for her to notice him. It had been a few days since I'd last seen Karen, but I didn't need to see her to know she was still involved. She was always involved. I should have known better than to think they'd back off. By the time I came back to pick Emily up, I could feel something was wrong before I even reached the cafe. The door was ajar. The lights inside were dimmer than usual, and the parking lot was almost empty. I parked the car, heart pounding. As I stepped out, my mind raced, trying to imagine every worst-case scenario. Maybe it was nothing, maybe it was just the slow hours of the day, but the air felt heavier, like something was about to happen. I walked toward the entrance, the glass door rattling slightly as I pushed it open. I could see Emily standing behind the counter, talking to a customer. Her back was to me, so she didn't notice when I entered. Then I saw him. Todd was standing by the door. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes focused on Emily, like he was waiting for the right moment to pounce. And standing beside him was Karen. My stomach dropped. They weren't just hovering anymore. They were interfering. I stepped inside, my voice cold and sharp. "What's going on here?" Emily turned, startled, as if she hadn't expected me to be there so soon. Her expression fell when she saw me, a flicker of fear flashing across her face. She quickly dropped her gaze, focusing on the coffee machine, as though it was the most interesting thing in the room. Karen's smile was as wide as ever, but there was something new in her eyes, something darker. "Oh, don't worry, sweetie," she said, smoothing her hair back. "Todd and I were just talking to Emily about a little favor she could do for us." I felt my jaw tighten, but I forced myself to stay calm. I knew Karen, knew her manipulative games. "What kind of favor?" Karen leaned in, lowering her voice to a mock whisper. "Just something to help Todd out. He's been so patient, waiting for Emily to come around. But she's so shy, isn't she?" I looked at Emily, her face pale as she avoided eye contact. I wanted to scream, to take her away from this nightmare. But I couldn't, we couldn't. "Do you think she's just going to change her mind?" I snapped, glaring at Todd. "You think that if you keep showing up, keep bothering her, she'll just suddenly start liking you?" Todd opened his mouth to respond, but Karen cut him off with a laugh. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," she said, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "It's not like that. We're just looking out for him, helping him get what he wants. He's a good boy, and Emily's just being stubborn." The word stubborn hit a nerve. Emily flinched, her hands clenched tight on the counter. I could see the tears threatening to spill over, but she refused to let them. "Enough." I stepped forward, my voice louder now, demanding, "This stops today. You need to leave my sister alone, both of you." Karen's face twisted, her smile faltering for just a moment before it returned, colder than ever. "You don't tell me what to do, sweetie," she spat. "I don't know who you think you are, but you don't get to control this." Todd shifted, clearly uncomfortable with the rising tension. I wasn't afraid of him, but Karen? She was a different story. I looked at Emily, still silent, still trembling. "Emily, let's go?" She nodded, but didn't move. The words I wanted to say got stuck in my throat. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me, on her. I couldn't protect her forever, no matter how hard I tried. As I turned to walk away, Karen called after me. "You'll regret this, you know." Her voice was thick with venom. Todd's persistent. "You'll see. She'll come around." I didn't stop. I didn't turn back. We reached the car without speaking, the silence between us as thick as ever. I could hear the slight tremble in Emily's breath as she slid into the seat beside me, her eyes still wide, still distant. I started the car and drove away without a word, but I knew, we both knew, it wasn't over. And I couldn't let it end like this.